Maybe you should tell your boyfriend to buy you a new pair. Colin, what happened to your friends?
I'll be late.
Hello. Colin, you live at home with your parents? Yeah? Siblings? Older, younger? Man, woman?
Yeah.
Close? How old?
16.
Oh, 16. That's Larky's age. Is he single?
No.
Wait, is he going out with Lark? Would you have any objections if he was going out with Lark? Ah, hello. Nathan. So, is there anything you guys want to talk about, or should we just go home? Yes, Adrian. If there is nothing, it's okay.
How does trauma affect someone with processing?
You know, like how you watch boxing before they begin, they kind of stretch out a little. Trauma and wisdom, huh? Okay. Hello. Okay, so that's one topic. Anything? You sure? Danielle? Okay. Colin?
Do you think morals are objective or subjective?
Okay. Yasmin?
Oh. What would you define as a crime?
As a crime?
That's good.
Being in this class? Okay. 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 So, objective, subjective, trauma, wisdom. Who's a criminal? Okay. Okay, Mark. It's only because he's got a younger brother who's 16. Okay, so Lark is empty. Emily? Okay, Joey? Alex? Emmy?
I like the trauma. The reason why I say that is because I am seeing a therapist and I didn't realize I was having traumatic experiences until she broke down what trauma meant.
Hello, Abby. How are you? I'm good. So you want to talk about trauma? You're seeing a therapist. I mean, you just said it. You're seeing a therapist, and your therapist, after lots of back and forth, made you realize that you've had trauma
Yeah.
in
I
your
didn't
life.
realize it. laugh too when I said, no, I don't have any traumatic experiences. She's like, you sure?
I'm just listening to all these questions and they just make me laugh. Okay. Avi, anything? You guys know Avi, right?
Yes, of course.
How was the baby shower? It was yesterday?
I went to work too.
Hello.
What is the danger of being exposed?
Emily. Oh. Thank you. Yeah.
You know, there's that one scripture that association spoils its plans. And, you know, by everything that comes off of that, that's what I was trying to ask is, how is it exactly, what are the mechanics of the people around us influencing us and our morals and the way we think?
Don't you guys like have any like simple, silly questions?
Wasted wisdom.
Okay, so let's talk about ideas and trauma and wisdom and Lark enjoying your question very much. See what you've been missing, Yasamin?
Oh, so much.
Yes. So, I guess I should start with a little story. And then we'll just go on. Right? Of course. In 1975, I think it was, I go home and my mom sits me down and says, "We're sending you to India." India? I'm 5. Why are you sending me to India? You're going to go to India? But, okay. Next thing we know, we're on Lufthansa and we're flying to India. And my brother and I were the only people on this airplane. You know, he was 10, I was 11. And we take rickshaws all the way to Mysuru. For those of you who don't know, rickshaws, they can either be moved by horses, but mostly donkeys, but most often by just people. And in the 1970s, we didn't have a word for trauma. We didn't have a word for abandonment. We didn't have a word for love. I mean, parents rarely look at their kids and says, "I love you." It's not like today, you know. And parents certainly would never come to like you graduating from first grade and going to the second one, or your birthday because now you were like 3. So they're stupid. And so, and just in case you express some hurt, that, you know, are you guys coming with us? And they would say no, and then you would sit and cry. That wouldn't happen. Just in case you would cry, they would probably kick you or punch you, slap you. So that would just increase your pain a bit. And many years have passed by. And life has been up and down, you know, things have been difficult once in a while, but we never use trauma, we never use that particular kind of language to kind of express why our life is the way it is. And the point I'm trying to make by that silly story is that if your culture doesn't provide language, those emotions don't exist. And even if they do exist, there's no container for them, you know. And so the first thing you need to understand is the culture creates language, it also creates emotions, and then it also creates expectations. And just in case any of those areas are not met, then the word trauma comes in. Okay. Yeah. You need a physical container to hold that emotion. As long as there are no containers, it doesn't exist. You're going through something. But then when you argue I'm being traumatized, and then you have a culture that creates this wave coming towards you and defines trauma into various different branches, then what you have is a really rich language and a rich set of emotions. And then you internalize all of that, you know. I mean, it's difficult to internalize those and understand them at the age of 50. When you're 12 or 13 or 14, it's going to be nearly impossible because you don't have the tools. Yeah.
Do you think some feelings are innate?
Like what?
I mean, you know that children get deeply affected if they aren't held when they're really young, if there isn't a consistent source of care, like in the early primary years. That's an innate feeling of abandonment.
I don't really know how true that is. I think one of the things that have happened the past many years is that the West happens to be a very, very powerful culture in its military, in just the things it produces and, you know, advertisements. And so what usually happens is it holds this exoticness to it. And people from the Near East, the Middle East, they imagine that the West has all these wonderful things it has to offer. So what it does is that now, whenever you go to the Middle East or India, you have these satellite dishes, and you have Desperate Housewives, and then you have, you know, Bluey and all these different shows. And what you have is these pop psychology philosophies enter these cultures that didn't really have the language, didn't have those emotions, and all of a sudden you infect people with these things. I don't really know if kids need to be held. I'm sure they are, you know, for a few minutes here and there. But the way Western psychologists kind of map this out, the formative years, we never knew anything about midlife crisis. You know, we just knew life was tough. You get married, you have a job, and then you die. That's it. You know, this idea that you have to go on the spiritual quest, figure out who you are, what you are, and this happens when you're like around 40 or 45, or the formative years of the kids from the age 0 to about like 10 or 15. The parents have to be around. They got to kiss them and hold them and hug them and this and that. That didn't exist, I don't think. I mean, I'm no psychologist, I'm no sociologist, but I look at my own friends, I look at my own past. None of those things existed. And yet, I mean, it's kind of like you go to the deepest and the poorest parts of, say, Africa or India or the Middle East. We don't have mass shootings. Why is it that in certain areas, anger does not lead to mass shooting? Loneliness does not lead to mass shooting. We have revolutions.
There's also like concentrated forms of violence. We have militias in the name of like.
Yeah, in the name of justice and fairness, but you don't have a guy going up a building and shooting innocent people.
Do you think that's just and fair? He thinks he's been wronged to the point that he can do that.
Who?
The person who's committing mass shootings.
No, that's not the point. The point I'm trying to make is when you walk around this planet, you'll find places where people are really, really poor. Yet they're not alone. They don't feel lonely. They don't need therapists. They're not medicated. They're just sad because life is unfair. Here you have an abundance, you have privilege, and then mental illness is going up the roof. Now, look, I'm not saying that one should adopt Near Eastern culture. I'm not saying that. I think every culture creates its own diseases. It also creates its own remedies. Here, you have loneliness. How do you remedy that? Well, you have Tinder. Here, every piece of advertisement out there has some sexual elements, then you have porn. That's what you do here. Here you don't have parents, but you do have therapists. You don't have religion, but you have psychologists. This is how we remedy stuff. Again, every culture, when I was in India, Abhi will tell you, not Dutch. So, you're walking on the grass barefoot and this plant, rubs against your skin and now you have a rash and it itches. And if you itch too much, scratch it too much, it begins to bleed. Right next to the plant, it's its medicine. And after a few days, people will tell you, just in case this particular plant touches your skin, just look right next to it. Just grab some, rub it, it'll go away. And that's what every culture does. You can't, if you have been exposed to the word trauma, you can't go to the Middle East and by simply going there, assuming that this word trauma would exit your soul. It just doesn't work that way. I've had many students in the past who have enjoyed, say, some parts of my classes, the language, the poetry, and then they got on the plane, go to Iran. And I keep telling them, what are you going there for? Just because, you take your sari behind to Iran and you learn the language and you learn the culture, it doesn't mean that culture lives inside you. You are an American, stay in America. English is a good language. You just need to kind of be around the right books and the right people, But again, all of us are carried by various fantasies. Yeah, go ahead.
I think what I was curious about is that, you were mentioning that, you would go to park. Also, I didn't grow up in the West. I moved here when I was 16, which I feel like is the more, I grew up in the Middle East. So I feel like I agree with a large majority of what you're saying, but the idea that these don't exist in Middle Eastern culture, they just exist on like cultural relevancy. Maybe the trauma here is to the job that you hate, or you're afraid that you might get shot at school. In the Middle East, it could be something else. And a midlife crisis is only in Western terms, but there are many men in the Middle East, even some, most of the prophets received divine timing in their 40s because they felt so lost. So there are things in the Middle East that are cultural parallels. Would you not define them as trauma?
No.
You just don't label something that doesn't exist. If we didn't label trees, then it would. There might be kind of two ways that something can exist. It can exist in the physical world, like the sky, the cosmos, whatever. Those are real. But if we didn't believe that they're real, then they wouldn't exist to us. So trauma, it might be I don't know much about trauma, but it might be a thing that's already a real thing that happens to us. But it only exists if we have a meaning to it. Is that what you're trying to say?
Forgive me, Tammy.
That's okay.
My brother-in-law, hello, are you still sick? Because if you are, you have a companion here. My brother-in-law was in the war with Iraq for about 10 years or so, and it was a brutal war. What is that word? PSTS? Yeah, PSTS. It just didn't exist. You go to war. It doesn't mean that you're not going to sometimes be angry. It doesn't mean that you're not going to be depressed. But you don't have PSTS. It just doesn't exist.
Those cultures have words to describe what you're talking about.
Yeah, life is shit. That's what the culture says.
No, absolutely not. First of all, psychology is completely practiced in the Middle East as well. So
This is a recent phenomenon.
yes, so is psychology.
Yeah.
Just like modern medicine.
First of all, the sort of psychology you're talking about is very, very new. our psychologists for the past many years were the poets.
Absolutely, I agree.
Yeah, that's all I'm
Absolutely.
saying. I'm
But
just
that's
saying you
still
take
not
Western
happening.
stuff, you dump it over there, and all of a sudden you say, oh, well, listen. I mean, look, consider this thing called incest in the Middle East, especially in Afghanistan. It happens all the time. And yet, at a certain point, these young women, they get married, they have their own children, it's finished. But they live in the Middle East. Should they travel to America and should they once in a while raise their hand in the classroom and say, by the way, when I was 2, I remember my uncle or my dad and my brother did A, B, C, D, then now you have a whole host of concepts and ideas being introduced to them. Okay? And then they begin to kind of say, like the story about the centipede. Do you guys know what a centipede is? That tiny little bird with like 50,000 legs. Right? And so the centipede is walking. It's perfectly fine. And all of a sudden, this like raccoon goes to him and says, hey, you got all these legs. God could have just given you like 5 legs, but look at all that stuff. How do you keep your balance? It's something that the centipede never thought about, never reflected on. And so he basically looks at the question and says, raccoons are just stupid animals. And stupid animals always ask stupid questions. So they part ways, and after a while, the centipede looks at, her legs and says, oh my God, I mean, look at this, like an army of legs I have. How do I really keep my balance? And from that point on, starts tripping over itself. And that's one of the problems with introducing ideas. I mean, imagine if I was to be introduced in India. I went to a boarding school named Woodstock, governed by the British and a little bit of the Americans. Imagine if at the age of 11, I was told that my parents sent me to India because they didn't love me. And every single day they hammered that idea into my skull. And they didn't love me. They didn't want me, And once you have a piece of advertisement blitzing you on a daily basis, human beings can only, push things away for so long. There comes a point where your defense system kind of just breaks down and you invite the ideas in. And you, who have been social for all these years, all of a sudden, after lunch, you go to your room, you sit and you say, perhaps my parents didn't love me. And if that's the case, why did they have me? Did they really have to send me to India? What is wrong with me? And at the age of 12, you self-blame. My parents are going through whatever they're going through because of me. I am evil. My brother is evil. I'm a burden to everybody. And then all of a sudden, your value as a human being goes down. Then you get depressed and you get lonely. Then every time you get into a relationship, you say, well, if my parents didn't love me, want me, why should this other person love me or want me? And so from that point on, every relationship you walk into, you walk into them with a good amount of doubts and skepticism about what you are and what the value is. And then you end up like me, 65, lonely, depressed, sad, in need of therapy, psychologist, medication, probably tried to commit suicide a few times, Now, look, like anything else in life, if you have an infant, just give him milk. If you have a 1-year-old, mash potatoes for him, carrots, and then shove it into their mouth. If they have teeth now, then give them some steak. The idea of living in a culture where you have all these different people, different stages of life, some intellectually like infants, and you give them these heavyweight ideas like trauma, like depression. I mean, how could a 5-year-old understand that, process that, overcome that? And the answer is it's not possible. So when you talk about, forgive me, Tammy, I'll shut up.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to second what you just said, because the comment I made about the therapist was I didn't know I was experiencing trauma. I gave her a little background about my parents and how they grew up, and she asked me, did it affect me? I said, no, I don't have that story. That's not my story. I don't hate my mother for the bad decisions and choices that she made. She said, well, because she did this, you experienced this. Yes, but she did give it language. She called it trauma.
Yeah.
I didn't know I was experiencing trauma. I said, that's not my story. I don't hate my mother.
Yeah.
She made some bad choices.
Did you cancel all of your appointments
no,
with her?
I still go. The only reason why I started going to a therapist is because of menopause.
Oh,
But
menopause.
when she started to break down so something came up and we had this discussion about parenting. And I think I told you maybe a week or so ago about my daughter saying, you were a good mom, but you weren't emotionally available. What is that?
Yeah,
My mother wasn't emotionally available.
neither was mine. I mean, look at me.
But she did good. I have no complaints about my mother, even in her addiction.
Yeah,
Even in her addiction.
Yeah.
That's why I told my therapist, I don't have that story. My mother was an addict, but she was a functioning addict. So
Yeah.
it's different. We ate, we had a roof over our heads, she did everything. She wasn't a bad mother.
What's the difference between trauma and just like a bad event that happens? It's like bad things happen all the time. Is it just like the amount that it affects you?
so how did it get here?
Trauma.
I
Trauma.
can Google it. It's okay.
So, there are big issues and there are small issues. There are big events in life, and with the help of your parents, they're reduced to small things. There are small issues in life, and when you have the wrong people around you, they become big. If I was to quote the guy who passed away a couple of days ago, Robert Redford, do you guys know who he is? You have no idea. Shame on you. Robert Redford he's like the Cristiano Ronaldo of movies. Does that inspire you to Google him? If you're allergic to movie stars in Hollywood, I'll give you a couple of things from the Buddha, which is really about 96% of life is just pain and suffering and misery. That's what life is. If you're born as a human being, you will suffer. There is no other option. Coming to this class, it is painful. I mean, she is sick. She wants to stay home, and watch a good movie. Yes. I mean, look at her body. She was healthy for a few days. Now she's on the verge of death. Right? You have all these plans for your future. The wrong ones you will obtain. The right ones out of reach. You will get married only to realize it's not really what you expected. You will have kids only to realize it was such an awful decision to make. You drink, you have a good time, then you go home puking. Your creature is born in darkness. And we try the best we can by reading books, by talking to people, by taking ethics, to figure out what right and wrong are, what future holds for us. But it's all in the dark. And we make decisions in the dark. Add to it, you go through all these different stages in life. And what worked for you at the age of 16 no longer works for you at 20. And what works for you at the age of 20 doesn't work for you at 30. And what works for you at 40 doesn't work for you at 90. Every different stage brings about different issues, different questions, different problems, and we don't have answers. And then the last thing, which is like death. How the hell do you cope with it? How do you go towards it? Because when you begin to think about death, you have to think about your life and how you lived it. And it's not going to be a very joyous event. Before we talk about how we move into trauma, Let me tell you a little story. Yes, Yasamin. What is it now?
Well, I have a question.
Of course.
Um,
I don't mean to. Look, this is my own stuff. I have been traumatized. So, go ahead.
So, like us, what's the difference between like a bad event and trauma? And you, like somebody can fact check me, I don't know. But from my understanding, trauma is just something that happens to you at a stage in life where your body, like you don't have the mental capacity to like comprehend it, which is why like being bullied at the fifth grade is gonna like affect you differently to being like bullied when you're 25. So like it's a complex event that happened at a young age or like at a point in your life where you can't understand it. It's also why like you could still be traumatized well into your 60s because something larger than like maybe you're in a mass what shooting or something.
Like the earthquake this
Like
morning.
the earthquake.
Yes.
So like the things that traumatize us are relevant, but there's a relevancy to us, right? Like whether what stage we are in life, our socioeconomic, whatever. You mentioned earlier that the East has like a tendency to exotify the West with like the abundance of things that we can have access to like, I guess essentially.
Britney Spears, Beyonce,
Right. of
MC
course.
Hammer.
So, and then you also mentioned that the West is like a largely individualistic culture. Wouldn't it make sense that like the trauma that people in the West experience is as a result of individualism, but inversely, there's trauma that can be experienced in other ways and other terms as a result of other cultural problems, like problems in the East. Like maybe largely, like for example, I would argue the way that women are often treated and portrayed in the Middle East is traumatic. That's a very traumatic existence. Maybe it's not traumatic in the relevant Western sense. When we talk about trauma and my mom didn't talk to me when I was 8. These are still both trauma. The only thing that changes the cultural relevance. Just like when we were in 5th grade, bullying was traumatic, but it wouldn't be at 25. Don't you think that like this is exotifying? You're doing exactly what we say we do to the West by talking about the East instead?
Am I saying that the East is better than the West?
No.
Yes.
Oh, okay, fine. Sorry, I thought you were trying to
Am I saying that we have better food? That
Absolutely.
yes.
Yeah, okay.
Do we create better people? Yes.
Okay.
Is our politics corrupt? Absolutely, far worse than here. Does the politics impact the psyche of people there? Yes. So let me tell you 5 stories now that you have pissed me off. Yes. Yeah, I think I may need a therapy after class. Yeah.
Can trauma only affect like the individual, or is like kind of like generational trauma? Or like you talked about Robert Redford dying. My boyfriend was in a movie with him actually. So my boyfriend's he's a lot more beat up about his death than I am because I didn't know Robert Redford. But are the people that know him traumatized, or is everyone who's watched these movies traumatized? Or is no one traumatized?
Okay, grief and trauma are 2 different things, but if then we'll okay. Now, yes.
Of the generational trauma. Like Abby said how, her mother, she did all this stuff and she was there and she was okay with it, but like kind of passes down to her child and she feels like these things are okay and affects her child. I think that's kind of like necessarily what generational trauma is. Like it's not gonna always affect everybody. I think it's about the highlighting of how everybody is different and how there's like a basis or like a base level of what should be going on to meet certain criteria so you don't pass on generational trauma. Even if you don't feel like it affects you, you have to kind of reflect on how even it's like saying how it's like if you were in a school while there was a school shooting and it wasn't as traumatic for you. It was like, okay, at least I made it out. There's some people that are young that say they can get past it. Like, they're gonna be like, damn, at least I made it out. Or like, especially if you're around shooting already, or like, you know, like growing up in Oakland, or there's probably been a time when you heard gunshots and stuff like that. Like, there's gonna be people who are like not affected by that because they have their own experience, so they can be mentally stronger. But there's obviously gonna be another person that is like, damn, like, I'm gonna be traumatized about this forever. You know, it's about the highlighting how everybody is different and how they should be treated.
This is deep class today.
Yeah, but.
Y'all traumatized.
That was you, Adrian? You know what? You're not going to pass this class. So, all right. Okay. So let me share. Yes, Alex. You have more stuff you want to say?
And I think that also like generational trauma and generational curses kind of go hand in hand because like by you not being affected by that, that makes you more prone to passing down the generational curses by not being aware of it. And that's what causes generational trauma.
Okay.
When my grandmother came to America, she had to go through security and she had to be fingerprinted. But she had no prints to be printed. And so she was detained. This is like a 80-year-old woman. She was detained for a number of hours. And they checked her bags like 5, 6, 7 times to make sure that she's not a potential terrorist. And then eventually, an interpreter walked into the class, into the room, and asked her, "So, Grandma, you don't have prints on your finger. Why is that?" She said, "From the age 3 up to this point, which is 75, I've been washing dishes, cleaning the house. I have no prints left." The concept of this woman feeling that she's been abused, that life has wronged her, it just didn't exist. The culture didn't have those concepts. It didn't have the language. That role was given to her by the culture. She accepted the role. I'm not saying that you're not going to find some black sheeps out there who are going to rebel. But for the majority of people who kind of just enter into a culture and inherit the culture narratives, that's her story. That story changes when someone introduces them to a different set of perspectives. I had a friend who lived in Eritrea, went to Sudan when there were wars, lots of killings everywhere. It's like New Orleans during Hurricane Katrina. You know, you're driving in the highway and the alligators just munching on a corpse. And so everything that we knew about life, it was just turned upside down. Eventually she made it to America, but she witnessed a lot of horrifying scenes. Then of course she signed up for a few classes at a certain high school. And so it was a day where everybody had to stand up and tell their story. And this young woman stands up and says, "Well, I'm from Eritrea. We went through Sudan and we saw this and we saw that. We were detained, we were put in prison." And the instructor asks, "Well, who are you with?" "I was with my mother." "Did she do anything to protect you?" "No, she couldn't." And so after class that day, the instructor took this 12-year-old to the counseling office. And then from the counseling office, they made an appointment to a therapist office. And slowly these new ideas were introduced to her. She was 12. Now she's about 50. She's been depressed for the past 35 years because they did such a good job selling those stories to her, you know.
So it's ignorance of bliss, is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
As long as you don't know it doesn't exist. I mean, look, one of the things that happened last night when we had the 4 point some earthquake is that you begin to ask yourself, is the roof strong enough and it's not going to fall on your head? Are you going to die? Will you make it out the door? Is the earth going to open up and swallow you? And all of a sudden, death becomes very imminent. You feel its presence. Now, had the earthquake not happened, none of these questions would exist. You know? And I came here at 4 a.m, and I'm the only one in the tower building, you know, for like 3-4 hours. And as I'm driving, I'm saying, you know, what if there's another earthquake? And I've been in that building, and I know how it shakes. It's happened the past 20 some odd years a few times. And I was thinking to myself, what if there was like an earthquake, you know, a bit more stronger and this building was to kind of fall apart? Would anyone come and get me? Would anyone know I'm here? No. The answer is no. Now, I don't usually have those questions in my head. I have a different set of questions, but not those questions. And those questions are only here because of the earthquake. Okay? So when someone plants ideas in your head, these are ideas that you never had before, there's a good chance that if the experience is intense enough, and as Yasamin rightly said, and if you're not really in the proper state to reflect on it, to process it, to understand it, but someone all of a sudden comes forth and gives you tools, gives you more things to chew on, all of a sudden those ideas that were so irrelevant become relevant. You know?
Are they not for your own like well-being, like knowing that there's an earthquake that tried to harm you?
Well,
That knowledge would save.
no, that knowledge devastates you. First, if you know that there's a good possibility of your demise, that you're going to die, then you have no choice but to ask, what should I do with the next few moments that I'm alive? You're going to question everything that you're doing and every single relationship you're involved with. Whether it's your boyfriend, your cell phone, it doesn't really matter, the classes you're taking. And your values come under attack. And what are you going to do with them? You know, in as much as death is a branch that liberates you from life, and if you have a soul, if you believe in those things, you can meet your maker. If on the other hand, that's not your position, and death kind of makes everything irrelevant because like a vacuum cleaner, what do you hang on to? You know? One of the nice things about us is that when you speak about trauma, you're talking about something that refuses to be forgotten. You know, it's like you have a boyfriend and, you know, you're banking on that relationship. One day you come home and he's got his stuff packed and he's leaving. And you don't know to figure things out, but he's not giving you anything. And so he leaves. And so you want to have some food, but the experience doesn't leave you alone, so you can't eat. You want to get some rest, but the experience doesn't leave you alone, so you can't rest. So you toss and you turn, and you're just in a foul mood for the next 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks. One of the nice things about us human beings is that it doesn't really matter what happens to us. We will forget unless it keeps rewinding over and over and over again. Now, trauma lives inside your soul. It's something, when something is in your feelings, feelings come and go. Even emotions come and go, okay? If something is inside your head, the world is a competition for ideas, piece of advertisement. Every 5 seconds, someone desires to occupy some space in your brain, okay? When you're talking about trauma, it's something that goes beyond your thoughts and beyond your feelings and emotions. It just lives inside your soul. And one of the problems with trauma is that it's like cancer. It leaked itself to every part of your body. You know, it's your brain that has a tumor, then it goes into your kidney, then it goes into your liver, then it goes into your heart, then it goes into your jaw. And before you know it, there is nothing left to you. Okay, that's the problem with trauma. Now, it takes a while for a certain event to be categorized as traumatic. But before we talk about that, yes, I'm on. Of course. No. I was asking about, sure. I mean, even this morning I called the kids and said, you know what? Let's go to Ace and get a couple of buckets and put some Cheerios in it, some candles, some this, some that, you know. some magazines, and all those things. You guys don't like Times? You don't like the New York Times? You don't like to read papers? The point I was trying to make, yes, that was a different story. Yes, you're absolutely right. Let's move on. Now. Hey, Kim, what's going on? Good job. Now.
So I'm confused. Be prepared, but still be in.
No,
What?
No. Even if you were to make a bucket in case of an earthquake, you'd probably store it somewhere. And when the earthquake hits, by then you probably have forgotten where you put the bucket.
Or you can't get to it.
Or you can't get to it. Or the rats got into the bucket before you. Now, all those things aside,
Okay.
no, please, I'm trying to. The function of life is just, it is what it is. I think Trump said it wisely. It is what it is. You come to class, have a good time, you have a miserable time. You're in your car driving home and all of a sudden someone rams into you. You know, you're walking the stairs as I did, and all of a sudden you feel this burning sensation in the middle of your chest. You leave the classroom, there's a message on your phone, Dad died. That's just the way life is. Life just creates events. It doesn't care for who you are or who I am. Camus was right. The Algerian existential philosopher. You're born into life. You're black or you're brown or you're white. That's just the way it is. You're born in Montclair because you got rich parents. You're born in East Oakland because you don't have rich parents. You know, you get lucky, you have a good instructor. You're so unlucky, you get a shitty instructor. You know, everybody comes with a different body type. Everybody comes with different temperament. You're either born in a religious community or you're a Republican or a Democrat or this or that. That's just the way life is. You know, you walk around the lake, someone looks at you and flips you off. And what the hell can you do if they happen to be a Mike Tyson? If on the other hand, a 2-year-old flips you off, you pick him up, you throw him in the water. You know? The point I'm trying to make, life is in the business of creating things. We are in the business of trying to figure out what the hell to do with all the things that come at us. That's what we do. You know? And everybody is equipped, has a different digestive system. You know, you have a 5-year-old who hears that his mom is dead. It's okay, fine. They go out playing soccer. You have a 50-year-old. And you would assume that the 50-year-old would know, but they kind of fall into depression and then they suicide. Life is unfair in many, many ways. Our only task in life is how do you deal with some of the events that life offers us? For those of us who have the toolbox, we do fairly well. For those of us who open the toolbox and have nothing, we'll probably do awful. Okay. Now, all of us in this class have been in the business of solving issues or problems. Whenever there's a problem, there's a disturbance. Wherever there's a disturbance, your comfort goes away. You're sitting on your sofa. All of a sudden, the TV shuts down. The breaker, you say. So for the next 10 minutes, like a rat, you run around the house trying to figure out where the breakers are. So before anything turns into trauma, and we're talking about gradual trauma and something that's very, very, very immediate. So there's a disturbance. You get up, you try to fix it. You realize it's not as easy as you thought it to be. Now you're a little annoyed. Annoyance. Not only do you have to fix the issue, but you also have to figure out what to do with the fact that you're annoyed. And your wife asks, "You want a glass of water? Be quiet!" Now you got three issues. Your wife is pissed, you can't control your emotions, and the breaker is still not getting fixed. Then as you play with the stuff, you realize you're sweating and it's irritating you. You were supposed to sit and watch a great movie played by Robert Redford. And then you throw your tools down, you walk into the kitchen, your wife says, "Well, what happened?" "I'm fucking pissed." Whoa, what's happening? "I'm really angry." Now, you didn't start being angry. It gradually happened. Is it true that your wife can harass you for the next 20 hours? Use your anger to punish you for all the awful things you've done to her for the past 50 years? That could eventually become traumatic because it ends in a divorce. Right? Then, it's like you go for a walk, you let the emotions subside, you're a little bit more level-headed, you go back to the breaker or whatever the problem may have been. It just remains unsolved. I want to figure out why my mom is this way, why my father is this way, why I am this way, why my mother had to take me through Sudan and not Canada or France. Why can't I be as good as my brother or my sister? And then you dwell on those things over and over and over again. And like any other relationship, you spend too much time with anything, it begins to occupy more and more space inside you. There comes a point where you don't want that virus to be inside you. You want to yank it out, push it out, but it's too big now. It's like cancer. There is no cure for it. Radiation, it's painful. Chemotherapy, painful. Your body just turns black. And you gotta take pills that are huge. And you're exhausted all the time, you're in pain all the time, you are nauseous all the time. You need to understand what trauma is and how it functions and how it expresses itself through us. But you're not yet in a place called trauma. What you are is, you come to realize you're incompetent, that you don't have the proper tools to overcome this particular issue. Then you get sad. And you've gone over the anger issue. You've matured a little. Now you take the experience, you internalize it a bit more, you're a bit more reflective. You realize you don't really have very many tools to deal with this issue. And sadness turns into depression. Once in a while you can get yourself out by reading a good book, by forgetting about your problem, by watching a good movie, by having a nice conversation. And you turn out to be like Soren Kierkegaard. Sad people have a very satirical personality. They're funny without really being funny, So you go to parties, you crack jokes, and people think that you're so much fun to be around. And then you walk home and you walk home alone. And it's always dark. Because the reality of who and what you are always haunts you, comes back looking for you. That yes, Kierkegaard, you were really, really funny. You were the sun in this party, but look at you. Your loneliness is here, saying hello again. Your depression is here, saying hello again. And there comes a point where your sorrow gets so much where you're all depressed. In depression, you're alone. No one can understand you, not even you. You're not yet at a place where you want to go somewhere and read a book and find some tools. You're not there yet. By the time you get to a place of depression, you've tried so many different things. And nothing has helped. And then you wake up, you look at your wife, but you look at your wife in a very depressed mood. Then you look at your kids in a depressed mood. Then your parents call you. And they say, hey, honey. And your mom knows it's your mom. What's wrong with your voice? Did something happen? What she doesn't know is that you've been this way for the past 2, 3, 4, 5 years. But you've been able to pretend really, really well, but not anymore. And then you go to work. You just don't want to do anything. You you hang out with your friends, but you're always sitting in the back very quietly. You know, they crack jokes, everyone laughs, but you're not laughing, and they ask you, well, wasn't that funny? And the truth is, no, not really. You don't even know why you're there with them. For the first time in a long, long, long while, you actually feel quite homeless. You don't belong to your body, you don't belong to your family, you don't belong to your wife, to your kids, nothing works. Now, that particular state you're in, it impacts every arena you walk into. That's called chronic depression. Now, to be chronically depressed, it took about 5, 10, 15, 20 years. It all started with a tiny little issue, an advertisement. They made that issue bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. I mean, some of us in this class have been in relationships. It's just the way you put the cup in the dishwasher. That's how it started. And then it went to vacuuming, then the bedroom, then the goddamn house, then the fact that you don't make enough money to move from Oakland to Richmond. And then he says it's all because of your parents. And then you say, well, it's all because of the white man or the black man or the brown man. All of a sudden, it began with the cup and the dishwasher. How did we get here? I want a divorce. That's called gradual trauma. And it can happen to anyone if you're not careful. Then there is one that we call snatched. That's something about you just gets pulled up, out, trashed, and replaced by another you. There are certain biological factors. Menopause happened to be one. Young women, age 12 to about maybe 16, 17, they're going through some hormonal changes. That's another. You know, if you have a good support system, there is a possibility of kind of pushing them away and bypassing some of the evils that could be the outcome. If on the other hand, you know, you don't have parents around you, maybe brothers or sisters who understand this stuff a bit better, who can guide you, then if you're left to your own, then there's a good chance that this biological event can turn out to be, you know, psychological, and it may never leave you. Yasamin had talked about the prophets of the ancient world who were traumatized by certain events. That's actually not completely accurate. There are some of us in this classroom that just ordinary life is not enough. I don't know why. I don't know why for some of us in this class, just having a job and making money and being married and having children, and having, you know, friends and power in life, it's just not enough. There is something about some people that there is a spiritual or emotional yearning, this quest, and they don't really know what it is. Okay? Some happen in time, and some are temperamental. Some people are just never grounded. They are made of what we call air, temperamentally speaking. They're a bit more abstract, they're a bit more detached. They will love intensely, at the same time they can walk away very, very, very easily. It's very difficult to explain the reasons why these people are the way they are. Now, they're very much in life, at the same time they don't really feel part of life. At a certain point, they really just get tired. Or maybe not even tired. What they do is they spend maybe 5, 6, 7 hours in the world, working at Home Depot, going to classes, being around their family. And from maybe 6 at night till about maybe 4, or maybe 6 to 9 or 7 to 9 or whatever, they go to the back room, sit very, very quietly, read some books, maybe turn off the lights and just sit quietly. Sometimes they pray, sometimes they cry, sometimes they just sit still. Who the hell knows? But they're after something. And then there is the breaking point. If I was to give an example, there's an old guy who used to do like sittings or meditations with this woman. At the time he was about 50 or 60. The person he was doing this experiments with or sittings with, she was about 30. They would sit together, their knees would touch, their hands would be held, and he was married, she wasn't. They had sex. And during this exercise, he had an experiment. I mean, he had an experience. He couldn't describe it. All he knew is that he didn't want to be around this 30-year-old anymore. And he didn't want to go back to his wife. And he didn't want to go back to his kids. He just knew that he was made of different stuff. And that stuff can no longer be held by life, guided by life, controlled by life. So he just left. And that's a very traumatic experience, because not really for him, because he understood why he left. Now, there are good traumas and there are bad traumas. A bad trauma would be if I hear the news that my father has died, I'm married with a few kids, and I don't really know how to process the information. And so I look at my wife, she means nothing. I look at my kids, they mean nothing. I look at my life, that means nothing. I abandon everything. And I go into the woods, not because I'm a spiritual quester. The news was far too devastating. I didn't really know what to do with it, so I just abandoned everything. You know, so I get rid of all of my responsibilities and I just walk away. Coming to realize that death is like a Dyson vacuum cleaner, just removes everything from life. The other is like the Epic of Gilgamesh some 5,000 years ago. My father is dead. And for the first time in my life, I come to realize that nothing in life really means anything. Once you die, you die. Death doesn't hold value. What holds value is the way you live your life, what you want to do with the moments, what you want to do with the hours, with the days, with the months and the weeks. And so I look at my life and I find it completely meaningless. I look at my wife and I say, listen, you know, I love you, I love the kids, I want to be responsible, you know, but I can't do it anymore. So I grab a plane and I go to India or Middle East or Nebraska. I find a hut. I find a teacher. I want to figure out if I am more than my physical body, if I'm more than the accumulation of my thoughts and experiences. And lo and behold, 10, 15, 20 years pass by. I realize, yes, the Buddha seed, the kingdom of God really does live inside me. And through lots of training, I've come to experience it. Okay? So you have one trauma that devastates you. You have another trauma that devastates you initially, but ultimately leads you to the promised land. Eventually, all of us have no choice, hopefully, to get the news that our dads or moms, you know, they just passed away in their sleep. It's a very, very good death, you know. You'll be sad, you'll be in a grieving mode for a few weeks, and then you'll forget and life will continue. Was it traumatic? Absolutely. Did you recover? Definitely. If on the other hand, you have a kid brother or a group of friends who keep telling you to contemplate about death, the meaning of life, and that can eventually turn into trauma, something you won't forget. Yeah.
Do you think you could talk more about, forgive me, I think I sounded a bit antagonistic, but I was just trying to understand your point. Can you talk more about why not, like, if life is very difficult and inevitably we are going to face extremely hard things, I'm still trying to understand why talking about it or putting a name to the things that we're experiencing would make things worse and not better. And how can that be sustainable to just continuously like not question the things around us?
There are a couple of things. Unfortunately, one has to do with age. Okay, that when you're young, and the world is wonderful out there, and there are things that happen to you, and we're like boiler systems. Life builds pressure inside you, and some you need to vent. So you have friends, you have parents, you have Facebook, you have all this stuff. And there is this need about us where we want to kind of share our experience with other people. Okay. There comes a point, and this is again mostly in regards to age and temperament. You get to be 60 or 70, and you've talked enough, and you've been around enough. And it's not that you don't have bad days and you don't have bad times or bad events happen to you. We just don't talk about them anymore. There is no need. You've done that. You've been there. Now, for you, I think it's really, really important for you to vent the issues out. Because in language exists your image. In language, you get to see your emotions, you get to see your thoughts. And the places that are inconsistent, you'll have a chance to refine them, to revise them, and to make them more eloquent, more articulate. So in that sense, it's good for you. And the ability to communicate this sense of self-expression also makes you, hopefully, a more reflective, a bit more mature, a bit more decent human being. You know, so in that regards, it's really, really, really good. The next thing is the following. Oakland is in Northern California. Northern California eventually lives in California. It's a huge place. California lives in America. Just one tiny little place. America is in the world. We are just our own galaxy. We are a speck of dust. I don't remember my grandparents. I don't think about them. I don't talk about them. You are not very significant, which means that neither are your issues. The more you get to a place of insignificance in a very educated and mature way, that yes, life is bad. Yes, life has offered you some bad hands. Yes, you are suffering. But you also know that you will suffer alone. So just keep your mouth shut and do the best you can. Just in times where it's just too much for you, go to church. If you don't have a church, find a friend. That's fine. But ultimately, venting about your stuff is an expression of how important you think your life really is and how important you think you are. And I think, to be fair, all young people, all of you in this class, are important. You should vent them out. You know, other people will tell you how right or wrong you are, how justified or not so justified you are. There's nothing wrong with that.
Isn't that what therapy is?
No, I don't go to therapy because I just lost my job. I mean, it depends what age you lost your job and what your job was. We had a psychology instructor on campus. I will not mention her name because she sucked. I mean, she was really, really a wonderful teacher. Not really. She was awful. And so one day I run into her on Lakeshore. I say, "Hey, what's going on?" I'm on my way, she says to me, to see my therapist. "But you teach psychology, right?" "Yes." "You're going to a therapist?" "Yeah." "But you teach psychology, right?" "Yeah." "Why do you have a therapist?" "Well, I go there to talk about my stuff." "Well, you're a psychologist. Don't you have the tools?" "Well, no. I just want to go and talk." "Well, don't you have friends?" "I have no friends." "Well, how about siblings?" "I have no siblings." "How about parents?" "No parents." What you realize is that sometimes we go to a therapist's office, Simply because we have no one really in our life. It's not because we want to fix our issues. We just want to like talk to someone.
Isn't there value in that?
There is. I didn't say it's not. There is. It's just your issues are not going to be resolved. There's value. You know, I mean, look. One of cancer. I mean, imagine I got cancer. Can you imagine that? You need therapy. You have some serious issues. Now look, now imagine I have cancer. Well, do I now have dreams and hopes in life? Are there not things I enjoy? Have I not planned for my future? Is the news that I got stage 7 cancer? I'm very unique. So whatever life gives me is also very unique. Okay? You're just jealous. Now, so yeah, when this news is given to me that I'm going to die, what am I going to say? Oh yes, thank you, God. No, I'm going to say no, not me. You know, someone else is going to get it. You know, not Colin because he's got a 16-year-old brother. Right? Not Colin. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, you know what? It's not happening to me. It's not happening to me. I'm going to get a second opinion. And I go to Kaiser and they say, yeah, you know, your first doctor was wrong. We don't have cancer stage 7. It's stage 25. You know? So I'm going to continue denying it. I'm going to say, yes, I'm going to go to Jumbo Juice and start drinking like liquids. That'll get rid of cancer. I'm going to start, you know, eating organic or stop coming to Laney. That's been the reason. Then I realized it doesn't matter what path I take in my life. Cancer isn't going to go anywhere. Then I get really, really angry. Say, me, I'm a nice guy. I give taxes. I give my taxes, not just to the, you know, government, also to the church. You know, I'm kind. I'm a decent human being. I go to my classes and crack a few jokes, even though I don't really teach them anything. You know, my students laugh. You know, why me? Why not? Not Colin. Not Colin. I become angry. You know, and then I say, then after I move from the stage of denying to the stage of anger, I say, you know what? Maybe I'm going to go to church. I'm going to talk to God. I'm going to say, listen, reduce stage 27 to stage like 10. And I'll be kinder. I'll be nicer. I'll be more decent. And I'll be in that stage for a while, you know, thinking that if I was a bit nicer to my wife, God is going to look down and reduce my sentence. But that doesn't work. Then, knowing that my life is slowly ending, I'll get really, really sad and depressed. And then if I'm lucky, and if the pain is not too much inside my body, I look myself in the mirror and say, you know what, Amir? People are born, people live, people get sick, and people die. If you want to die, and if you want to die with cancer, at least approach it with some maturity. Accept it. So now when my wife brings food to my bed, I said, thank you. When my kids come, I say, listen, I'm sorry I couldn't spend too much time with you guys. You know, the point I'm trying to make, Yasamin, is that for me to get to a place of acceptance, that I'm okay with the issue at hand, it's a 5, 10, 15, 20-year ordeal. And here's the other tragedy. You can't force yourself to get there. No one can. In as much as you don't want trauma to be inside you, and even though you want to push it away, it's not on your time. No one gives a shit about your time. No one gives a shit about you. Trauma will go away when it's ready to go away. And when it does go away, what you do is this. You have learned how to look at it, how to feel it, how to think it, how to process it, how to break it down and use it as food.
Yeah.
Wisdom. For the first 15, 16, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, we're just traumatic creatures. We're just walking around because we feel bullied by everyone and everything. You know, when you're on a man pause, like I pause, I sit in my room and I reflect and I read and I think and I write. Then for the first time, I'll have the ability to look at life, possibly learn from it, possibly learn how to express. Where are you going, Caden? Yeah, I know, it's time to go. I mean, my apologies. Have a nice day. Good to see you, man. Anyone else with anything else? I guess that's enough trauma for one day.
Oh, I have one last question. You know the scenario with the centipede and the bird?
Yeah.
You're the centipede, right? Yeah. Well, I think you're the bird in that situation. But why does the bird tell the centipede about his legs?
Can I be honest? Have your parents ever sat you down and talked to you about your romantic relationship?
Sort of.
Do they worry about you?
Sort of.
And that's the thing. I think your parents have come to a place where they say, Lark is our daughter. We have raised her with our tears and the blood of our heart. She is our life. And so they give themselves credit for the time spent on you. They value you tremendously. And so once in a while they come down and they see you having a good time. Like the bird, they come down and say, listen, if you continue A, B, C, D, E, F, G is going to happen. Are they introducing concepts to you, ideas that could turn your relationship upside down? The truth is, yes. I think whenever you think that you have something of value, and you may be completely delusional, you know, but whenever you assume that you have something of value, you have no choice but to share it with other people. I mean, look, someone like Stephen Miller, do you know who he is? The guy who's currently like working for Donald Trump. So he comes on TV once in a while, and there is just something about him, the way he speaks, his facial expressions, you know, his dislike for immigrants, his dislikes for black people, brown people, all kinds of people. He thinks that his ideas are very, very valuable. And the dangerousness of that is he has actually the power to bring those ideas down and enforce them. And that goes both ways. It could be your parents who love you, imposing certain things on you, being the bird, or it could be your parents who hate you. Like a mother who has never had a good relationship in her life, romantic one, sees you. She is your mom. She's supposed to be happy for you, but she's enormously jealous. And so she will do whatever she can to sabotage your relationship. You know? So you have two kinds of centipedes. You have two different kinds of birds. And you have two different impositions and impacts. You know? Why couldn't Jesus just leave us alone? Why couldn't Socrates leave us alone? Why couldn't Muhammad leave us alone? Because all these people imagine that they have something that benefits us. I mean, if you were to come to my office and say, Amir, I think I'm going to drop out of school and just go on this long journey with my boyfriend, I will do my best to punish that particular frame of thought as gently, you know, and as professional as I possibly can to dissuade you from that path. Why? Because as an immigrant, as a man who's like 3 times your age, I've been in romantic relationships. They're very, very flimsy. I also know about fantasies and dreams. I know about the importance of money, rent, homelessness, America, capitalism, the fact that no one in this country cares for anyone because that's just not the way this culture works. So I will try to dissuade you. Do I think my position is valuable? I think so. Will you walk away from my office thinking, what a piece of shit? Maybe. some people are just curious. The bird looks at the centipede and says, man, you are like a work of a magician. I mean, look at this. You have 1,000 legs. That's an amazing thing. And there is such harmony, And yes, it is true that you're moving these legs organically and harmoniously, but can you really have the ability to also understand it? And that's the problem. There is nothing wrong with you being in love. But can you express that love to your kid, brother, or sister when it's time? Do you know what the anatomy is? Can you open up this thing and just push it in their face and say, these are the things you will go through? And if you're just moving towards feelings, you're not going to be much helpful to your brother. If on the other hand, you really, really understand it, you're like a prophet or a saint to your brother. And I think that's the function of the bird. There are lots of centipedes around. They're walking nowhere. Once you realize what a gift you have, maybe you'll take your sorry ass to places that actually have some value. Having said all of that, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.